What's good, you guys? If you're a non vegetarian in India, chances are that you're a chicken person just like most of the country. And if you're someone who lifts weights and doesn't know much about cooking, chances are that you've eaten boiled chicken for the longest time. On Beer Biceps, I keep promoting the idea that every lifter should know how to cook just so that their life becomes more fun. And that's why I thought I'd come out with these Beer Biceps cooking tutorials. Today's cooking tutorial is all about chicken, so let's go. Okay, so tip number one when we're talking about cooking chicken is that you've got to understand that different parts of the chicken cook differently. And the two parts that are consumed primarily are the chicken breast and the chicken leg. Now, here's the thing about chicken breast and leg. In both cases, you are eating the muscle of the animal. But what happens is that on a chicken's body, there's lesser fat deposited near the breast tissue, but there's more fat deposited near the leg. So when they're deconstructing a chicken carcass, when they take the leg piece off the carcass, a little bit of fat tends to attach to the leg piece. Now the little extra bit of fat results in two things. One, more deliciousness because fat is flavor. And two, it also tends to keep the meat a little bit more moist. Also, the advantage of using a chicken leg is that it has the bone to keep the meat moist. Remember, whenever you have the chance to cook meat on a bone, you should cook it on the bone. In the cooking process, the bone releases a lot of moisture and a lot of flavor into the meat, which results in a super tender, super delicious chunk of meat. And while we're talking about chicken breasts, remember the advantage is that they're super low calorie, but they tend to dry out if you don't know how to cook them well. In India, unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to go about the whole cooking process when it comes to cooking chicken breasts. Remember, the thing about chicken breasts is that they cook very, very fast. And if you cook them too much, they tend to become stringy and chewy. And unfortunately, that's what happens when Indian restaurants don't know how to cook chicken breasts. But keep in mind that chicken breasts, there's a few hacks involved. Which brings me to point number two, how to cook the perfect chicken breast. Okay, now one very crucial thing when you're cooking chicken breasts in this way is that they need to be at room temperature. If they're too cold, they won't work with this technique. So if you're gonna cook it this way, make sure it's at room temperature. The first hack in cooking a chicken breast is that you've got to understand that it's not an even piece of meat. It's thicker at one end and thinner at the other. And if you want meat to cook evenly throughout, you need to kind of make sure that it's the same size throughout the length. And that's why the first hack in cooking a chicken breast is that you need to just flatten it out a bit. So put it between two plastic sheets of paper and just kind of hit it either with your hand, or if you have a meat mallet at home, use that. Now in this case, you are flattening out the chicken breast, but what you're also doing is that you're kind of tenderizing it a bit. So after this flat chicken breast is cooked, because the muscles have kind of broken down already thanks to all that beating that you've given it, it'll result in a juicier, tender piece of chicken. That's the first thing you've got to understand about cooking chicken breasts. The second, the technique. Okay, now as I said earlier, chicken breasts need very little heat and very little time to get cooked. They're very lean pieces of meat, and the leaner a piece of meat is, the faster it gets cooked. So after you've beaten your chicken breast a little bit and it's a little bit flat, one hack in getting a juicy chicken breast every time is using a very hot skillet with a decent amount of oil. And once that oil is super hot, the skillet is on a high heat, you can go in with the chicken breast and just lay it down flat on that skillet. So leave it for about a minute on one side, and at that point you can flip it over to the other side. You give it a minute of heat on the other side as well, and then you take it off the gas. So once you've taken it off the heat, keep in mind that it's not entirely cooked from the inside. But what's happened is that the borders of the chicken breast are very hot, and that heat tends to seep through. Now your job is to rest the chicken breast for at least 5 minutes and let all that external outside heat kind of just seep in and cook the chicken from the inside. So you rest it for a good 5 to 10 minutes after this skillet heating method, and you're left with a very juicy, very tender piece of good old chicken breast. Okay, so that's one way of cooking chicken breast, but keep in mind, we're using a little bit of oil in that method. So if you're one of those people who wants to just have chicken breast and ensure that your dish is super low calorie, this is one of your ultimate food hacks. Use a tenderizer. The greatest tenderizer of them all is the raw papaya. Now this method of using a raw papaya as a tenderizer originated in the Caribbean. Now here's how it works. You've just got to cut the raw papaya open and make slits out of it. And you take a bunch of those slits and just place it in the same bowl as your chicken, or you can even place it in your marinade. Now what happens is that each of those slits release an enzyme, and that enzyme for some reason has the ability to break down the meat. So eventually, even after say about 20 minutes, you're left with much softer chicken. But if you want to get best results by using this method, use it when you're making kebabs and leave the slits with the chicken overnight. Now the cooking process while you're cooking chicken using these raw papaya slits is that you want to give the chicken a low and slow heat. So about 180 degrees Celsius or 350 Fahrenheit will be just about right. And you place it in a hot oven for say about 15 minutes. That's all you need. Remember, when the enzyme breaks down the chicken, it's making it much softer. But because it's also breaking down the internal proteins inside the chicken tends to cook faster and you're eventually left with a very juicy, very soft, very tender piece of chicken meat. One of the greatest food hacks of all time. Okay, so that's that when we're talking about chicken breast. But now let's move on to the more delicious side of things, cooking chicken legs. The advantage of cooking chicken legs is that it's very difficult to mess up even for people who are just starting out on their cooking journey. But cooking chicken legs isn't as simple as just giving them heat. What you've got to understand is that chicken legs are full of these little tendons that you kind of just need to hack through. So the hack when we're talking about cooking chicken legs is the slitting method. This is something that's used in a lot of Indian restaurants. So to ensure that the meat absorbs the marinade well and to ensure that the chicken leg is cooked evenly throughout, you've got to go about the 1-3-3-1 slitting method. So you take a chicken leg and your first slit you've got to make in the inside of the drumstick, just near the base. And you see that there's a tendon that runs through this area. You just need to pull out that tendon. Then you've got to move on to making 3 slits on the drumstick and 3 slits on the thigh of the chicken. And your final slit will be at the junction of the drumstick and the thigh on the top of the chicken leg. Once your slits are in place, you can place them in your marinade, and then this can go one of 2 ways. Either you can cook this low and slow to just ensure that your chicken leg is super tender, but even if you give a high heat to the chicken leg, it's not going to get overcooked thanks to the presence of the bone. And this is my preferred way of cooking. So I crank up my oven to about 250 degrees Celsius, and that's when I'll place the chicken leg inside that hot oven. So what happens is on the outside you get this little slightly charred coating, and on the inside your chicken leg is perfectly cooked thanks to that bone. So you can leave it in a super hot oven for about 15 to 20 minutes and you're good to go. Remember, practice makes perfect, and you'll be able to master this art of cooking chicken legs only if you get at it. Okay, and the fifth and final point when we're talking about beginners chicken cooking tips is that you've got to use the flavor of chicken in your cooking process. Remember, chicken has a very natural, very powerful flavor full of something called umami. So how there's the 4 tastes, sour, sweet, bitter and salty. The 5th taste is umami. It kind of gives this meaty feel to food. And chicken adds a lot of umami to curries. And this is also why a lot of people prefer using whole chicken while cooking chicken curries. If you cook chicken curries with the bone tends to release a lot of chicken stock or chicken water. And that chicken stock is what adds a lot of depth of flavor to that curry. So what you've got to take away from the 5th point is that you need to be completely open to using bones in your cooking, and you should also be open to using skin in your cooking, chicken skin. Another part of the chicken that's barely used in Indian cooking. Now in one of my past recipe videos called the keto chicken curry, I've used the skin in order to create a very big depth of flavor for the entire curry. So if you want to know how to go about cooking chicken skin, go for it, watch that video. But the downside to using chicken skin and using bones is that it adds a lot of fat to your chicken curries. Remember, fat is flavor, and bones and stock and skin add a lot of flavor to food, but they're also adding a lot of calories to your food. So if you can afford the calories, definitely go for it, because chicken stock enhances almost any dish in the world. Make sure you use chicken stock in other dishes as well. Even if you're cooking just your regular fish curry, just a little bit of chicken stock adds some kind of depth of flavor to that curry. Either way guys, that was the video for today. If you liked it, make sure you give it a thumbs up. If you like these cooking tutorials that I'm releasing on the channel, let me know, leave a comment below. As usual guys, you all know the drill. Handles, Facebook page, and until next time guys, from Ranveer, see you.